Hello, everyone. My name is Teresa Andrasfay, and I am a recent demography PhD graduate. My dissertation was entitled Health Across the Life Course, and I will be presenting the results from one chapter of this dissertation today. I wanted to start off by thanking the Center for Health and Wellbeing's program in U.S. health policy for funding the data used in this project. I'll begin with some background that motivated this chapter. As the growth of the US population in coming decades will be driven by immigrants and their descendants, and as these immigrant groups become increasingly diverse, it's important to understand how these immigrant groups fare in terms of health in order to understand future health disparities. In general, foreign-born women tend to have better birth outcomes than do US-born women of the same race and ethnicity. Much less is known about whether these differences persist among their descendants, and this study addresses this gap in the literature. In this study, I employ 4 decades of administrative birth records from California, a large immigrant destination state. I do this to examine how racial and ethnic and foreign origin differences in low birth weight change across generations. And low birth weight here is defined as a birth weighing less than 2,500 grams or about 5.5 pounds. And the focus of this paper is on the intergenerational patterns of birth outcomes of less studied immigrant populations, namely Black, Asian, and Pacific Islander immigrants, although I include white and Hispanic immigrants as well for comparison. I want to introduce some generation definitions that I will use when discussing the results. So here, G1 is the grandmother generation, and we are interested in the race, ethnicity, and nativity of these women. G2 is the mother generation, which is defined as female births born to the G1 generation. Looking within G2, I assess the presence of an initial foreign-born advantage. And lastly, G3 is the granddaughter generation, which is defined as births to women in the G2 generation. Looking within G3, I assess the persistence of a foreign origin advantage. I conducted this linkage using FastLink, a probabilistic matching program that allows linkage of records without a unique identifier. And I did so by matching the corresponding identifying information from the G2 and G3 records, as shown here. And then I was able to extract demographic and medical information from 3 generations of records because each record contains information on both the mother and the infant. I'll now present some selected findings, some selected descriptive findings specifically. And results from additional analyses are described in the poster, and I invite you to check that out. So this first panel on the left presents the prevalence of low birth weight by G1 race, ethnicity, and foreign-born status. And the stars here indicate the significance level of a foreign-born advantage within each racial and ethnic group. On the left, we assess the initial foreign-born advantage by looking within the G2 generation. And here we see that an initial foreign-born advantage, which is evidenced by a lower prevalence of low birth weight, is present among most racial and ethnic groups, but not all. Asians as a whole, we see, do not exhibit a foreign-born advantage in low birth weight, nor do white women. In the subsequent generation, the foreign origin advantage diminishes or disappears for most groups, but a foreign origin disadvantage in low birth weight emerges for descendants of Asian women. And in separate analyses, which you can find in the paper, I show that the emergence of a foreign origin disadvantage was driven by descendants of Asian, Indian, Cambodian, and Filipino women. To conclude, this study contributes to the literature on the persistence of the healthy immigrant effect across generations. I find that there's not one healthy immigrant effect, but a multitude of effects that vary by race and ethnicity and across generations. These findings underscore the importance of disaggregating race and ethnicity and immigrant generation when possible to uncover and understand disparities that can be obscured in population health statistics. In further analyses, I found that observable risk factors available on these birth records largely did not account for the differences observed within each generation. And more This underscores how more research is needed to determine the medical and behavioral risk factors that are responsible for these differences so that interventions can be implemented and these disparities can be reduced. Thank you.